Episode 22, Jonbenet Case, One Clear Possible Scenario. John Ramsey knocked Jonbenet out unconscious with some metal object after a long Christmas day. There was no going back. He couldn't tell Patsy, and so he had to come up with a plan, what to do. And so he came up with the kidnapping. Jonbenet was changed into Long John's about 10 p.m. Jonbenet ate pineapple about 10:15. Jonbenet wet her underwear and her Long Johns about 11 o'clock. Jonbenet's skull was cracked shortly thereafter at 11:10. John Ramsey wrote the 3-page note between 11:15 and 12 o'clock. Jonbenet was strangled around midnight. Jonbenet was placed in the wine cellar and wrapped in a blanket sometime after 12. The key was the ransom note. First, it needed to sound like a terrorist group and a demand for money. Second, it needed to sound like no pleasing them, that they were going to kill Jonbenet. And so there's this she dies, she dies, she dies. And third, it needed to sound like they didn't like John. They had a personal vendetta, and it was revenge against him because she was going to be found dead. John needed a way to dispose of her body, and he couldn't be opening the garage or driving the car in the middle of the night. That would have drew suspicion. So he wrote this note for Patsy. So the note was written for Patsy in mind, and it had 3 main purposes. First, that it had to do with his business, and it was foreigners, a foreign faction that was doing this. Second, there had to be a lot of threats to his daughter because she was going to be found dead. And third, he used his name in it to make it look like they were angry with him, to explain why they killed her daughter. The relatively small amount for the ransom, $118,000, wasn't a mistake on his part. Think of it as the opposite. If he puts $10 million, how is he going to come up with $10 million in the morning? The reason it's $118,000 is it was an amount that he could get. He could get that in the morning from the bank. And therefore, when he went to the bank, he could dispose of her body. Here, think the opposite again. Instead of saying she dies, she dies, she dies, what if he would have said, she'll be safe, don't worry about it, she's okay. Then when they found her dead, they would be all shocked. As the note got longer, his personal feelings started to get into the note. The thing about the stray dog, John didn't like all these different people coming to his house. The construction workers, the gardeners, the maid. I think in the last page you can kind of see his ego. It says, don't try to grow a brain, John. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It's up to you. Like he's some kind of superhero, or that he's going to bust in there and rescue Jonbenet and save the day. John's plan fell apart like an old Alfred Hitchcock television show when Patsy called 911. He didn't want that. I believe it was Patsy's idea to call 911, even though they testified it was John's idea. Here it says, I think John said. And then it says, I ran down the stairs. Why would she run down the stairs? She was on the second floor. She ran downstairs to the telephone. Why would she do that if she wasn't planning on calling?
911 emergency. Police. What's going on? 5515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
I believe from that moment on, John Ramsey was in panic mode, and he never really got a break until later that afternoon, around noontime. And that's when he went downstairs and found Jonbenet, because his heart was going to give out. He was done. He had enough. This is when Detective Arndt said that everything seemed to make sense now, and that she could see in his eyes that John killed Jonbenet. I think one of the issues that was distressing to us, and that perhaps caused some bias of opinion, is why did we bring lawyers into this process early on? And I can tell you both how that happened and why it happened. The how is that after the tragedy, we were being told by friends and family, and a close friend of mine, who's also a practicing attorney, took me aside and said, "John, I think there are things developing here that I would like to ask your permission to do some things that I think are necessary to be done." One thing that might be distressing might be your daughter was tortured and murdered in your house. Maybe people feel like you should have worked with the police and not hired an attorney for both your wife and yourself. And maybe his lawyer friend should have said, "John, there's something about you saying John." Just like in the ransom note, it says John 3 times. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved. And maybe on the next episode, we'll look at another possibility. John killed Jonbenet by accident.